What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Never Lag. I'm one of your hosts, Levi, joined by the legendary one and only man who fell into the pit, Zach. How you doing today, Zach?
I'm good. Feeling legendary. Thank you very much.
Feeling
Uh,
legendary. Wow.
that's a lie. I feel exhausted and out of shape. But how are you doing?
I too feel legendary, which I mean by that I mean out of shape and exhausted as well. So rare form as always, and of course that's great because we have some legendary, a legendary amount of Sony news that has poured out today. In addition to all of the gaming news from the past week, which we are about to get to, because of course this is This Week in Gaming, the show where we sit down and discuss the news, reviews, and hot takes from the past week in video games. So if you're all about it, you can support us over on Patreon, patreon.com/neverlag. And of course, right here by doing what you're doing, watching on YouTube or listening wherever you get your podcasts from. So let's talk games. With all this legendary news, how many stories did it amount to?
Well, we've got 7 news stories, and then, of course, we have a couple of review roundups we'll do after the news, as well as at the end, we'll tell you some of the free stuff and upcoming games. So quite a bit to get through, and I think we can just jump into it. So our first story of the day is God of War Ragnarok might be coming out this year. That's probably not really breaking news. That's what most people are expecting. But the actual news is from Ryan Dinsdale on IGN. His name Dinsdale makes me think of in Fairly Odd Parents. You got the Dimsdale Dimmy Dome. Uh,
Oh my
it's a,
goodness.
it's a deep cut.
I
Well,
vaguely remember what you're talking about, but that's
I'm
that's
sure our
throwing it
viewers
way back.
I'm sure our viewers care quite a bit. But anyway, Ryan Dinsdale from IGN reports that God of War Ragnarok has received its rating in South Korea, suggesting the game is on track for its 2022 release date. So when I first heard this, I was like, "Wow!" Like they already have a rating in terms of like reviews. Then I realized I was an idiot. They're talking about
Oh my gosh.
like rating in terms of what's the ESRB or whatever. So
Right,
it's
right.
rated 18 and over or mature
Rated R.
as usual. But the reason that's notable is because generally a game being rated usually signifies that it's a relatively complete version, and that makes sense because to effectively
Yeah, it would
rate a
have
game,
to
you have
be.
to know it. You have to know what the content is going to be, so it should be in decent shape. And the fact that it's May and this rating has now happened is promising for a release date this year, which is very good. I think it's super needed for Sony and for PlayStation fans because there's just this dearth of content for a while. And on top of that, it's on my Fantasy Critic League, so it doubly needs to happen. So, how do you feel about
Yeah, I know.
this?
I thought about like 2 weeks ago when there was all this news coming out about seemingly with no foundation that God of War's it's going to slip to 2023. And I was like, oh, I should test the waters and see if you want to trade a possible zero for a game that's for sure coming out. But I didn't ever actually attempt that. Probably should have, but yeah. This is. I always find it odd that why do they get rated first in, like, it always seems to be Korea or like, I wonder, do they get these at different times? Because the game releases the same time worldwide, I would think. I mean, barring time changes. So I don't know. It's always interesting because this always happens. It's always been rated in um, some random country. And
Yeah.
I was listening or reading something earlier today. I can't remember the source, but they mentioned that Forbidden West was rated. I think it might have been in Korea as well, in October, and obviously that came out in late February, so 4 to 5 months. Which,
Yeah.
I mean, that you can't take that to the bank, but that would seem to indicate that we're 4 to 5 months maybe from God of War releasing, which would put it in September, October, which sounds exactly right. So yeah, I kind of always thought this game was coming out this year. Everything that Sony has kind of said, and Cory Barlog coming out, and it just feels like they've been in the polishing or finishing stages of this game for a while. And yeah, I'm glad to see that it seems like it's on track to hit this year because, like you said, there's a seeming dearth of content in the fall or holiday season where typically there's a ton of games. But I also think we need to. This is a little bit of a side tangent, but we'll talk about this possibly on DualShocked in a couple weeks. I think Sony actually has a lot of big games that might be releasing this fall, and we're just kind of assuming that there's not going to be a lot. I think there very well could be many big games coming out this fall, but glad to know that. Well, I guess we don't know, but I'm happy to see more evidence that we won't be waiting till 2023 to play this game.
Yeah, especially because it originally was supposed to be end of last year, or that was kind of the initial
Yeah,
target.
they put the
So,
splash screen that said 2021, and everyone was like, "Yeah, okay."
right, right. And I don't think that was ever intended, but it'll be nice to get it by the end of this year. So whether that's September, October, even if we get it closer to the holidays, like, even December, I'll just be happy to have one of the big, exciting games for the generation to look forward to at the tail end of this year. Our second story is also Sony related. We have a few Sony stories today that we'll probably get into more detail on, like you said, in DualShocked in a couple of weeks, which is our PlayStation focused show. But today we'll breeze through a few of the highlights. So Sony shared some updated slides in their company's annual Investor Day presentation just earlier this week. And there's a couple interesting and notable things that they shared. So first of all, Sony plans for roughly half of its game releases to be on PC or mobile by 2025, according to this presentation. We'll throw up a few screenshots, but they show a chart in this presentation that suggests that this is going to be a huge increase from its releases this year, which currently is around a quarter of the company's releases are PC and mobile. So they're kind of looking to double that overall, which is interesting. And it kind of makes sense. They've talked a lot about how they want to transition into live services. And so live service games are, effective to have both on PC and on mobile. It's a huge market. As a consumer, that's not what I'm particularly super interested in, but from a business standpoint, I guess I get why they're doing this. So any thoughts on PlayStation's evolving portfolio of console to mobile and PC games?
No, we've covered this as the weeks have unfolded, and there's been news about specifically PC. Sony is definitely making a push into that market more so, and I think they're only going to continue as we see here. I don't know much about the mobile side. Apparently, they do have a couple mobile games out there that I don't really pay attention to. I'm more interested in the fact that they project $300 million in PC revenue over the next year because was it the next year or just to finish out 2022?
That's this
I
year.
thought it
You're
was.
jumping ahead, but you're absolutely correct.
No, I mean,
Well,
is it
okay, so it's both. So that is their projection for fiscal year 2022, which actually
okay? So that goes
technically
into
ends.
2023.
It ends and
Yeah,
like by the beginning of March of 2023. So it's
but even
throughout the
still,
rest of this year.
I would have to check the numbers. Oh, I think we have them here.
We do.
No, it's 80 million. So I think they're saying Horizon Zero Dawn, Days Gone, and God of War combined for 80 million last year. Is that am I reading that correct?
I think
More than
this chart
tripling.
is
Yeah,
just
yeah.
their overall PC sales, which I'm not sure if there's anything other than Horizon, Days
So
Gone, and God of War.
yeah, I don't know if that's like specifically accurate, but I have heard that God of War was somewhere around 25 million. Horizon did great at like 60 million, I think, and maybe Days Gone did less good. So somewhere around there. But point being, 300 million is a lot considering, assumedly here, Days Gone, Zero Dawn, and God of War didn't even reach 100 million
Mm-hmm.
combined. That really leaves me wondering. They must really be. It's one of two things. They either have a ton of backlog games they're planning to throw on PC this year, just like one after the
Mm-hmm.
other, or a lot of things that they are launching first party, which they don't seem to have a lot they're launching first party this year other than Ragnarok. Um, Maybe they're planning to launch Ragnarok day and date on PC. I can't imagine that's the case.
Yeah.
So that leads me to believe they're going to be taking a lot of what's left on PS4 and moving it to PC this year.
Yeah.
Because, and we'll get into a little spoiler for story number 3, but clearly Returnal seems to be one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What others come to mind that Sony could be possibly thinking they're going to reach 300 million in the next year?
Man, yeah, off the top of my head, I'm not even sure. Horizon, are are they maybe going to release Horizon Forbidden West like
I
before the
don't
end of
think
the
so.
fiscal
Not.
year? That
I
seems
don't see
too
them
soon.
doing that before a year has passed since launch.
Yeah,
I mean,
and a year from
I guess
launch would
if they
be,
released it in February, that could still be
yeah.
fiscal year. Yeah.
But how many
So that's
sales is that going to
possible.
drive immediately? I don't know.
I
Yeah,
don't know. I think it'll do well. It'll do very well.
it'll do
Obviously
well, but
Zero
I mean,
Dawn
if
hit 60 million.
right, it'll do well, but I mean, bridging the gap from 80 to 300 million, it's just a lot. Like you said,
It's a lot.
I
Yeah.
have to I have to
So,
imagine they have they have to have other titles they're planning to bring to PC, which is interesting, and maybe we
maybe
can
they're just,
speculate
maybe
more
they're
on it.
finally going to give us Bloodborne on PC and they're expecting that to hit like 290 million, which it
Yeah,
might.
that might do it.
That accounts for the whole 300 million. They're like, okay, we'll
Yeah.
finally put it on PC. So yeah, that's my most interesting takeaway from this is I'm very curious to see how Sony, as the months go on and we start to kind of see their announcements, how
Mhm.
they intended to reach this 300 million mark, because that is no small feat.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we'll have to wait and see it. They said, this these are their projections for their investors, so you can't lie to investors. That's impossible. But no, I guess I guess we'll see. Yeah, on the mobile side, I'm less interested in that, but I think it will be interesting to see how that and live service ties into their portfolio. But yeah, let's move on to our next story. You already kind of touched on this, and that is related to Returnal. So um, the Steam database listing seems to suggest Returnal is coming to PC. We have this story again from Ryan Dinsdale from IGN, who is linking to a tweet. Someone on Twitter, I'm not remembering the person's name, but I'll put up a screenshot of Nibelian. That's his Twitter name. He posted a few screenshots of some like metadata from Steam's database. In particular, there's a few key value pairs that indicate locations found within Returnal as a game. So there's like a key for status Atropos, and the value is Atropos, which is the planet the game takes place on, if I'm not mistaken. And then there's another piece of data for Tower of Sisyphus, and I think there's one or two other pieces of data that kind of were specific to Returnal's universe. So that's a pretty good indication that it is definitely coming to PC. I don't know that it gives us an exact timeline, but I mean, this is
Sometime in the
good.
next fiscal year.
Yeah, I mean, Returnal came out over a year ago now.
It's been over a
Um,
year. Yeah.
so I kind of would.
Wait.
Seems like they're kind of shooting for
Yeah. Yeah. It has
a
been over a
year.
year. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like they're kind of shooting for a year plus is kind of the timeline before they release their exclusive games on PC. So I think this is expected.
Which is what I said a couple weeks ago. I said I think it's probably going to be a year cadence, and I'd love to see them narrow that. I'd love to see day and date eventually. I don't know how long that's going to
Yeah.
take, or I think eventually that's going to happen. But yeah, it seems to be a year right now, and yeah, it's funny. Some of these things here they just describe kind of the genre.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like, oh, that could be anything, but then you've got Atropos and Tower of Sisyphus, and it's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
it's not really anything else that this game could be. So not much not much to say here. I mean, this is kind of expected. Obviously, it's part of their 300 million that they're factoring in. I don't imagine that this is going to do like gangbusters. I mean, this is a kind of one of the smaller fish when it comes to Sony's first party still, even though it was a huge kind of glow up for um, who did Returnal. I'm going to blank on it now, but this was a huge step up for them in their
Housemark.
in games that they've made. Housemark, yeah, and but still, it's one of the smaller fish. So I just don't see this making up a ton of that 300 million. I'm not terribly excited for it. I do remember on PS5 when I played it. Um, as great as it was, as smooth as it was, and the haptic feedback was all great. The gameplay felt great. The resolution was lacking for sure. I think I remember some Digital Foundry saying, it's hitting 1080p sometimes, and that was noticeable while playing the game. So that's a little bit intriguing to see if you can get a little more resolution out of it on a PC. But for me, I think I got my fill of Returnal on PS5. But more options is better. So,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah,
they've got to be announcing this soon, I would think.
I would think so. Yeah. So we'll see.
Guess
It's
we'll see.
exciting. More PlayStation stuff coming to PC. Takes us kind of into our fourth story, which is also Sony related. Quite a lot on the Sony train today. Sony reportedly has two more live service games coming this fiscal year. So again, by March of 2023. So this story is coming out of Video Game Chronicle from Andy Robinson, who's reporting about how Sony's president Jim Ryan said that essentially they're going to be expanding the number of live service games they have during this fiscal year. Um, and an analyst asked if the two additional live service titles were announced or are they included in Destiny's release from Bungie, which Sony is in the process of acquiring. Jim Ryan said to this that Destiny is not included in he then says 3 games slated for fiscal year 2022. The two others are yet to be announced. So it looks like these are separate from Bungie, additional live service games. That's all we have at the moment, other than the fact that they're coming. And again, Sony is planning to launch 12 live service games by the end of 2025 fiscal year. So again, they're going hard into live service games, which they define those as a game without end. I define those as a game that I'm less interested in playing because the monetization probably will not be great. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, we have only to look at Gran Turismo 7. So, yeah, that definition is pretty vague. And the fact that they include MLB The Show, um, I mean, I don't know that I would argue that, but it's just I'm left a little curious as to what they truly understand to be a live service game. Um, so we'll see. I'm very very hesitant about this whole thing. I mean, I was hesitant before Gran Turismo 7, and now I'm just like full red light here. Just I don't
Yeah.
I don't trust Sony at all to handle this. So, but it is interesting that he says they're both unannounced. So, I mean, typically we get game announcements years before we should or need to, and it's interesting to think that Sony has this and assumedly other single player games as well that have yet to be announced that they intend to release in the next fiscal year. I mean, we've heard almost nothing from Sony for a very long time. So it will be very interesting in the coming months to see if they legitimately are able to announce these games and they come out within a year of their announcements. And quite frankly, I think that's a good change. I'm really tired of seeing games 4, 5, even 3. 3 is reasonable, but 4, 5, 6, 7 years before they come out, it's just it's exhausting. So that leaves me a little bit excited. I like that we might have a lot coming from Sony that pretty quickly that we have no idea about.
Yeah. Yep. It'll be interesting to see what these games actually are, and whether or not they'll be things we want to play. Let's move on to our fifth story. Death Stranding 2 seems to have been confirmed by Norman Reedus, the actor who played was Sam? Is that
Sam
what his name was?
Bridges, Sam
Yeah.
Bridges,
How did I forget?
I think.
His name is literally
Yeah.
his name's literally the mechanic in the game. Yeah. So Norman Reedus was speaking to Leo magazine, and he said that they were asking him about his work on the first Death Stranding, and he was talking about how much work went into his motion capture performances. And he said it took maybe 2 or 3 years to finish the motion capture sessions and everything. It takes a lot of work. And then the game came out, and it just won all these awards, and it was a huge thing. So we just started part 2 of that. which is an interesting thing to drop so casually. Um, and then yeah, Hideo Kojima actually went on to react to this. So he posted on Twitter some photos where he has like a baseball bat and Norman Reedus is on his knees, and he says, "Go to your private room, my friend," which I'm assuming it was kind of like "go to your room" because you weren't supposed to leak this yet. But just the slight difference in like languages makes this extra endearing. I feel like it was just kind of funny.
Yeah, they seem like they
Um,
have a very cool friendship. Good for them.
yeah, Hideo
I think
Kojima
it's
seems
really
like a cool
cool.
dude to be friends with.
Yeah, totally. I think it's really cool that like Norman Reedus, I think he clearly, I don't know. It seems to me he does not have a firm grasp on um, the video game genre or like of entertainment. I don't know. It sounded to me from what I read of this quote that the person interviewing him was actually speaking of the past and like all the things he was doing when he was working on Death Stranding 1. And Norman Reedus just thought, oh, this guy knows about Death Stranding 2. And he like went ahead and talked about it. That's what it felt like. And I'm just
That's what
like,
it felt like.
but it's also really cool that like Hideo Kojima, um, is kind of just giving him crap on the internet. And
Yeah.
I kind of wish that I wish the industry in general was a little bit more chill about this kind of stuff. Like I feel like the video game industry is just way too intense about its secrets and not saying anything and keeping everything under wraps. And it's just I understand why they do that, but it can be a lot. So regarding Death Stranding 2 though, being in development, I mean, did you how much of the first one did you play?
I mean, I beat it. I didn't
You
platinum it,
did
but I
beat
beat
it.
it. Hmm.
Okay. So
Yeah.
for
So
you,
yeah.
Are you are you excited that there's a Death Stranding 2 coming, or would you have rather been surprised by a new IP from Hideo Kojima?
Oh, that's always a tough question. More and more, I tend to lean towards wanting a new IP. Um, However, I loved Death Stranding. It was probably the standout game of 2019 for me. Um, and I don't know exactly where it ranks in my top list of games, but it's probably in the top 15, maybe the top 10. It's really good. It's kind of a weird game. It's the mechanics are very different, a little bit zen at times, a little boring's not the right word, but it's like not the most action oriented game a lot of the time. But there's something about it that's
Meditative
really
almost.
yeah, there's something about it that's really special, and just the feeling of being in that world and traversing rainy and snowy mountain ranges and landscapes. Kind of having chill moments where this beautiful music kicks in, and then tense moment where these semi-invisible creatures are hunting you. With all the weirdness of a Hideo Kojima story and characters, it was really cool. So I think I'm excited about the possibility of a second Death Stranding. I'm not sure what they do with it, but it's Hideo Kojima. I'm sure he'll have something to do that's interesting. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah. I'm torn. I'm torn on it. Which is interesting because Death Stranding is actually, it is in my top 10, and I really enjoyed. I thought it was just really refreshing to play something that was trying to do something different, and I really enjoyed the arduousness of traversal in that game. It really felt like you would reach the top of a mountain or cross some very difficult terrain and you would look back and that would feel like almost beating a boss or something. He managed to accomplish that with just walking around, which is hilarious and I really enjoyed it. But I'm also just really torn. I'm like, I don't know
Yeah.
if I need a second one of that. I don't know if I need more of it. There was a lot of weirdness in Death Stranding, but then again, if Hideo Kojima went on to make something new, it would have a lot of weirdness in it as well. So I think my only complaint, I would love to see if he could find a way to incorporate some other gameplay in addition to the core gameplay of just traversal. Maybe a little bit more action in places or a little bit more stealth, something because uh, I guess I don't know, because the action sequences in Death Stranding weren't that great to begin with. So do I want more of that? I want more of it, but I want it to be better. I really don't know what I want here. So I'm glad
Yeah.
he's doing his thing, and I will I will I will be there to play it. We'll see if it's see if it can live up to um, the how much controversy the first one had.
Yeah. It's interesting because the director's cut looks like it adds more gameplay, more mechanics, more ways to fight and traverse. I'll overlay the
And
gameplay
a
trailer, but
racetrack.
in a racetrack, yeah. So I kind of feel like the director's cut feels like it would give me the above and beyond experience of this, and given how the story kind of ends, I don't know what a second one looks like. Part of me wonders, what if like Norman Reedus just slipped up with what he was saying and there's not actually a second one coming and they're just kind of playing it, like what if they're trolling us? Is my other question.
That's a good point. I mean, Hideo Kojima does that all the time. Maybe he is, because I was gonna say no. He actually tweeted it in response that kind of corroborates the fact that he leaked something real, but that's just like him. He's
Yeah,
he's he's already like 10 steps ahead of us.
right. Maybe this is all an elaborate ruse to get us to like have these expectations and then blow them away with some grand new
Right.
IP. Who knows? Um, hard to say with with Hideo Kojima, but either way, I'm down for his next game. Like I loved Death Stranding. I would be interested in seeing what a second one looked like. I'd also like whatever else Kojima does next. All right, let's move on to our sixth story of the day. Um, Xbox apparently turned down the Marvel franchise, which
Wah, wah, wah.
hindsight's 2020, but I feel like that's one you could have looked ahead and been like, yeah, it's
Yeah, I feel
Marvel.
like you didn't need hindsight for that one.
Yeah.
It's like,
Um,
would you like exclusive rights to Star Wars? No, we're really working on ourselves right now.
we have some new IPs that we think are going to be pretty good.
They're going to be
Um,
big. Have you heard of Recore? All right, go ahead.
I was trying to think of something obscure from them, so
I
no.
was trying to think of the Dragon game that got canceled. That would have been perfect, but I can't remember what it was
Yeah.
called. Dragon Scale. I don't know. Anyways,
um, so this is coming from Chris Scullion at Video Game Chronicle, and apparently, so Stephen L. Kent wrote a new book called The Ultimate History of Video Games Volume 2. Apparently, a sequel to the original, which came out like 15 years ago or something like that. And in this, he details how the executive vice president and head of Marvel Games, Jay Ong, explains like how the company cut its deal short with Activision, who previously had owned Spider-Man and Marvel and had been making those games up to that point. Um, so, according to Ong, Marvel Games wasn't happy with the quality of the Spider-Man games being published by Activision. So the two companies mutually agreed to terminate their licensing deal early. And as Ong and the Marvel team were walking away, Activision told them, like, what are you going to do with this IP after you get it back? And Ong replied, I'm going to find it a better home. And apparently Activision's reply was, good luck finding your unicorn, which is, it's really nice hearing those words now, knowing how good the
oh
Spider-Man
yeah,
games turned out.
no
So
kidding.
apparently Ong said Marvel games
Stupid
went both
Activision.
to both to Xbox and PlayStation to see if either of them would be interested. And yeah, it's just interesting that Microsoft was basically what you said. Like, we're just doing us right now. We want to focus on our own IP. So they passed on this offer, which even if you're working on your IP, like Marvel's huge. I just don't understand how Microsoft turned this down, but they did. Sony was obviously more receptive, and they figured it out. And Ong told him, like, this could be better than Arkham. Like we could have multiple games that could drive adoption of your platform. And lo and behold, Spider-Man, Marvel's Spider-Man from 2018 has sold more than 20 million copies, and Miles Morales has sold another 6.5 million. So, so nice work, Microsoft. You
Can
really,
you can you
really
imagine?
whiffed
Can
that
you
one.
imagine saying no to Spider-Man? Like, they bring you Spider-Man. They're like, we want you to make Spider-Man games, and you're like, no, I'm good. No thanks.
I'm good.
This was This was apparently 2014, so I would assume that this is right before Phil Spencer took over.
Right. No one knew about
One
Spider-Man in
must wonder.
2014.
That's true. One must wonder if this had anything to do with. I don't recall the name of who was there before Phil Spencer, but that maybe this was one of his final decisions. I don't know. This is horrible for Xbox. Like, if this is whether or not this is true, the fact that this is a news story and Xbox just delayed Star. I have brain fog every time. A Starfield, and they have basically nothing for the rest of the year, and everyone's kind of like, "Hey, we've been waiting for games for years. Where are the games at?" And here comes out an article. Oh, by the way, in 2014, Xbox turned down the rights to Spider-Man. Like, ouch! That really hurts. And so, like I said, bad for Xbox, but I am super glad that this happened because I have almost zero doubt that the game we got from Insomniac, or the games we've gotten and will continue to get from Insomniac, are leagues better than what we would have gotten from any studio over at Xbox. So
yeah, I'd have to agree.
Great for Spider-Man, great for Insomniac, great for Sony, horrible story for Xbox. And it's just brutal. It's honestly hard to believe. Like, I don't know what first party get. Like, honestly, Sony right now, take away Spider-Man. You know, they've got God of War, Horizon, Last of Us, Uncharted, other things I'm not thinking of right now. If they came to them with Spider-Man, I mean, now we're in a different world, right? Marvel's continued to take over, but even in 2014, like, it's just hard to imagine being someone who was
Spider-Man
like,
was big in 2014 as well. It's bigger now, but like Spider-Man,
and maybe
Spider-Man
there
was the one that was big before Marvel, or the rest of the Marvel universe.
Well, and Spider-Man's one of the most beloved characters. Like, Spider-Man stands on his own apart from Marvel. You know, like Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man, and has nothing to do with Marvel, and they're very successful. So I don't know. I'm sure there's another side to every story, right? Maybe there were extenuating circumstances. Maybe they couldn't take on Spider-Man at the time. I feel like you would drop whatever you could to do that, but not a great story. By the way, you know how I said it was either Dragon Bound or Dragon Scale? It's called Scale Bound. Okay. So anyways, they really wanted to focus on Scale Bound at the time, and they could not handle a Spider-Man game. So,
well, it's a good thing. Scalebound was, I don't even remember Scalebound, honestly.
So, it was canceled. It never came out.
Oh, it was canceled. Okay. Either way.
Yeah.
Well, that's a shame.
Yeah, it was scheduled to be released in 2017, and it never did. So.
Oh, crazy stuff. But yeah, I couldn't have asked for a better developer than Insomniac. They're amazing. And both Spider-Man and Miles Morales were fantastic. And I'm excited both for more Spider-Man from them, as well as, like, they've done so well with those. I'm excited to see what they do with Wolverine. So glad we have it in good hands. Yeah. All right, let's move into our seventh story. EA is looking to sell or potentially merge. So this is being reported from Darren Bonthas from GameSpot. Electronic Arts is reportedly pursuing a sale or merger. It's claimed that that EA has been having talks with Disney, Apple, Amazon, and Comcast, NBC Universal over a possible deal. Apparently, according to the news site Puck, which I'd trust them with my life. I actually have no idea who Puck is, but according to them, EA has been persistent in pursuing a sale. And at one point, it looked like Comcast's subsidiary NBC Universal would be merging with EA, but with the Comcast CEO Brian Roberts running the combined entity. But this fell apart for a variety of reasons, including the specific terms of the financials they were trying to negotiate, pricing and structure. So now it sounds like EA is interested in an arrangement that would allow its current CEO, Andrew Wilson, to remain on as CEO of whatever the combined company is, which is interesting to say, hey, we really want someone to buy us, but I want to run the new company. So I don't know. It's kind of just an interesting place. And it's not completely unheard of, but that just feels like a funny vibe to be like, we need somebody to acquire us, but I want to run it. So, um, yeah. Any thoughts
I
about
would like
this?
you. I would like you to purchase this, but I still want to be in control of it. No, it's more nuanced than that. But when the story first broke, not this story, but just EA wanting to be acquired in general, your thought is like, okay, Microsoft or Sony or one of these other big gaming companies, and here we have a list of Disney, Apple, Amazon, and Comcast, and I cannot think of a more awful corporate feeling consolidation of two companies. Like, can you imagine if Disney if Disney bought EA? Like, I genuinely wonder if Disney could buy EA because of the implications of a monopoly. Like, Disney's
Yeah.
already clearly a monopoly, and the amount of, I guess EA doesn't technically own, they don't own their sports games, they're all licensed. So that's the other thing I hate about this whole thing, is that I hope that nobody buys EA. Here's my hot take and opinions. I hope that no one buys EA. We finally get some genuine legislation around the world for loot boxes, and all of a sudden EA is worth a fraction of what they're worth now, right? Their value is so astronomically inflated, by all the microtransactions and the loot boxes in their sports games that they make all this money off of. Not to
Yeah.
mention the fact that they just parted ways with FIFA, and now will be rebranding their soccer game. And if you're looking at that, you have to assume some healthy loss of revenue from
Yeah.
rebranding, especially if FIFA no doubt goes on to find someone else to make FIFA games, right? You're gonna have fall off there. I just think EA is a house of cards, and I think it would be foolish for anyone to purchase EA at their current value. And the other problem I have with that is, if you buy EA at its current value, you have to continue doing what EA does to justify that purchase. Because if 80% of their revenue is loot boxes, no one's going to purchase EA and be like, hey, let's run this shit better, for consumers, and cut out that 80% of revenue. We don't want to operate like that. Like, no one's going to do that. So
Yeah.
what I would like is for this whole house of cards with loot boxes to come falling down, and all of these sports games and things that I enjoy to maybe find, this is a long shot, but maybe find a better home somewhere where it doesn't have to be a casino as well. Because it sucks. I haven't played sports games in years, and they could legitimately be some of my favorite games. I just don't touch them because of what EA has done to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have anything to add. I think that's a really good summary of where we're at. So we'll see what happens.
We'll see. It'd be nuts if Disney,
I
and the other thing, if Apple and Amazon, like, what a mess if Apple or Amazon, like these companies that have tried forever to get into video games and clearly
Yeah.
can't because they don't understand the medium. I just feel like that would be a disaster for them to own EA, but it all
Yep.
sounds bad.
Yeah, I know. Well, I feel like they're all going to take a similar approach of how can we monetize this versus what makes video games really special, because they already, Apple, Amazon, they already don't have that specialty of understanding how to make great video
Yeah,
games culturally. So acquiring EA is not going to help them with that, I don't think. Um,
not so
but
much.
I guess we'll see. But all we can hope is that our boy Andrew Wilson will find a home somewhere as CEO. It'd be a shame for
Yeah,
him
hopefully it
to
gets a
not make
hopefully it gets
crazy
a
money.
nice hopefully it gets a nice severance, because I know he might not have enough to retire yet. So
Yeah, I'm sure there would be a golden parachute involved if he was cut. Um, all right, well, let's move on. That wraps
uh,
up our news section of the show. We got a couple of review roundups we want to go through. So, two new games have released since we last did the show. So, first, we're going to go through a game called Dolmen. Dolmen is a strange title, but it's like a
it really
sci-fi.
is
It's like a sci-fi kind of Souls-like
Souls
ish
like. Yeah.
game. Uh, it looks kind of neat. I'll overlay a little bit of video. It actually looks kind of cool, but it's getting pretty dang well. It's getting poor reception, I should say. On
Yeah.
OpenCritic, it's sitting at a 57. On Metacritic, it's 56. A couple of reviews I've pulled here. We have Daniel Amoroso from Lords of Gaming, who gave it a 5.7 out of 10. And he says, for a developer's maiden title, Dolmen is a really ambitious project. In some places it works, the boss encounters are the high point, and for Souls-like addicts, they alone are probably enough reason to check the game out. There are, however, some glaring issues that prevent this game from getting anywhere near the heights of a Dark Souls or even a Nioh. Poor enemy and level design, lack of visual or audio atmosphere, and a story that doesn't engage the player. The list goes on. On balance, the bad probably slightly outweighs the good. He goes on to say that for Souls-like fans, there is certainly enough here to warrant a look, especially at its launch price point, which I actually didn't get. You know how much it's going for?
No, I don't actually.
Okay,
I never got that far.
Presumably less than $70 or $60. But while you look that up, I'll read another review from Donovan Erskine from Shack News, who gave it a 7 out of 10.
$40.
$40. Okay, that makes sense. So Donovan Erskine of Shack News gave it a 7 out of 10 and says, Dolmen is a solid sci-fi spin on the Souls-like formula, even if there are some places where it falls short. Not being able to jump is a simple but detrimental design flaw, and the mediocre cinematics bog down what could have been a very cinematic experience. Despite that, Dolmen still features challenging combat, as well as a variety of ways to play your own unique style. I look forward to seeing if and how Massive Works Studio will build upon this foundation in the future. And then we also have Mick Frazier from God is a Geek, who gave it a flat 5 out of 10 and says, there are dozens of alternatives out there, either for Dark Souls fans or sci-fi nuts, and Dolmen is just too riddled with issues to recommend. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it seems like you might be scraping the bottom of the barrel here if you're looking for Souls likes and you end up on this game. I had my eyes on this one. I saw not too long ago, but a couple weeks ago, maybe months, I saw some gameplay or impressions of this, and we'll throw some gameplay up on the screen. It looks really cool. Like it's really cool. Nailing the aesthetic and graphically, art style, all of it's really doing it for me, and that's kind of why
the creatures are super neat looking.
Yeah, so that's why I had it on my radar. And since release, I've watched one of the YouTubers that play a bunch of Souls-like games. I've watched him play some of this, and it's just, you can tell when you watch gameplay of it, it's very janky. Your character just doesn't control fluidly. Dashing or dodging looks just everything looks very janky. Hit registration, all of it. So it really does seem like you would be kind of suffering through a lot of jank to experience a pretty cool AA looking world. So yeah, it's kind of off my radar for now. I even think at $40 that seems a little steep.
Seems high
for what I've seen. But like you said, it's their maiden game. I haven't heard that one, but maybe they'll be able to take a lot of the criticisms from this and apply it towards their next game. And if you are scraping the bottom of the barrel, then here you go, Dolmen. Yeah, weird name. Hard to remember.
But like you said, if they take some of the criticisms and improve, and if they can get this up into the 70-80 territory, the world looks cool enough that I would absolutely be down to like check out their sophomore game. Even this one, if I could get it for super cheap or for free, the issue really is time more than anything, but it looks cool enough that I could see myself maybe checking it out if I got it for free or super cheap on, Steam at some point. But for now, I'm also going to be...
You're not allowed to play this until you get through Sekiro and all of the other FromSoft games.
When I'm old, then.
When you're old and gray.
All right. So that's Dolmen. Let's move on to, we have one more review roundup. This is for an early access game, V Rising. So this game doesn't have like formal reviews or anything yet. But a couple of outlets have started covering like their initial impressions. This looks kind of cool. It's like a vampire kind of survival game. I've heard it described as Diablo meets Ark, which is a kind of an interesting mix of genres. IGN, their current verdict with the early access version of the game is, while its time consuming crafting aspects can take the bite out of the vampire fantasy, V Rising really does rise to the occasion with its excellent boss design and respectable ARPG combat. A great vampire game is defined not so much by the power fantasy as it is by how well it forces you to work around the interesting lifestyle and weaknesses of the undead. So, keeping the killing rays of the sun and your dwindling blood supply as ongoing concerns is effective and evocative. It's not an automatic recommendation from me yet, though I do have close to half of the bosses left to face, but there's certainly a lot of good stuff to sink your teeth into already. If I had to score it now, I'd give it a 7, but I'm going to keep on going until I take down every last boss before I finalize this review, so check back for more later. And then PC Gamer said, V Rising kept me playing all night, which I'm suffering for terribly today, and I'm actually happy that the Valheim comparisons were a bit exaggerated. I adore Valheim, but it already does exactly what I want from a survival game of its type. This is something different, but potentially just as compelling. So those are some of the sentiments we're hearing so far. And then on Steam, V Rising has already sold over 500,000 copies while it's still in early access. So obviously it's seeing a lot of success early on. So I think this looks kind of interesting. I'm not huge on the survival genre, although I do occasionally play them. So I could see myself maybe checking this out, but I'm not necessarily sold just yet. What are you thinking?
Yeah, it's not really my style. It seems like if it seems like we're heading into a vampire phase. We've exited the many would say far too long of a zombie phase that we've been in, and it kind of feels like we're entering a vampire phase. So if that's what you're into, there'll be more of it. um I don't know, I kind of tend to stay away from early access games just as a almost a subconscious policy. It I don't know, I have a mental block when it comes to early access games. I'm like, oh, I'm just waiting for 1.0 for actual release. For the same reason I didn't jump on. It's funny that he mentions Valheim, because that was my first thought. That was the last game that absolutely blew up in early access. I think that was 2020. And I mean, just the whole world was playing that game. They sold millions of copies in early access. And I didn't jump on it either. It's just, I don't know. The early access puts me off. And I've watched some gameplay of this. Visually, it looks cool. It's not necessarily my genre, so I don't know I'll ever make it to this one, but it does look like, if any of that sounded good to you, I mean, it's popping off and people are really enjoying what they're playing so far.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks interesting. It looks kind of different, especially for the genre. So I think it seems like people who really like survival games are enjoying this because it effectively shakes up the genre a little bit. So that's worth keeping an eye on. I might check this out at some point. But yeah, if that looks interesting, keep an eye on it. Early access is happening now. It'll be interesting to see what the actual 1.0 release looks like. Speaking of 1.0 releases, I don't know if you saw that Temtem dropped its 1.0 release trailer. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. Which is crazy. I it's funny. You make me sound like a liar. I actually did buy that game in early access. Good grief.
I did too.
It's been 2 or 3 years since I bought that game. It's nuts to think that it's officially launching like here soon.
Yeah.
Part of me's curious to see. I played that game for a while and bounced off of it. I didn't like a lot of things that Temtem was doing. I don't know. I feel like we've just moved on, unless you're playing on like a Game Boy. We've kind of moved on from the concept of like grass patches that you have to run through to get certain places, and you may get random encounters. It just doesn't feel great in 2022 or 2020 for that matter. So, yeah, some of the world design just felt very antiquated to me. And so, but I'm curious to see. I mean, it's been years now, so I'm curious to see what they've done with the content there. And if it can be successful and prove to be an actual rival for Pokemon, and maybe get Pokemon to make better games. Probably not. That's spoiler. That's not going to happen.
Right. Probably not. But looks kind of interesting. The combat and the exploration look maybe a touch better, but pretty similar to what we played in early access. You also have like vehicles, so there's people riding around like on surfboards and motor scooters, and I think the trailer had someone running around on a mount or like a riding Temtem, which was kind of neat. So, but nothing in it stands out as super unique or interesting. But yeah, speaking of 1.0 releases, that was a bonus story that we didn't intend to cover. All right. Well, that wraps up our review roundup as well as our stories. So we got a couple of games coming out and some free stuff to highlight. Levi, you wanna run us through that list?
Yeah. Let's do that. I was trying to look up the first one here that caught my eye was Hard Space Shipbreaker, which comes out this week for PC, and it will be on Game Pass. So
Nice.
that's awesome. That's always fantastic. And I'm trying to figure out how to even describe this game. I've only seen snippets of gameplay. It looks like a puzzle slash, I don't know how realistic the physics are, but you're essentially in space. You have various tools, and you're trying to access certain areas. You're trying to accomplish certain tasks in the very dangerous environment of space, and it just looks very cool. It gives me, Subnautica type vibes, but I think the game is much more. It's a very different type of game where you're more so performing tasks and puzzles, obviously. But hopefully that is even relatively close to what this game is. But check it out. We'll throw some video on the screen. It looks pretty cool. It'll be out this week, and if you have Game Pass, you can download it and check it out for free. So that's always a win. And then the other one that's interesting, and this one really snuck up. I've known about this one. I had no idea it was coming out this week until I saw, is Cow the Kangaroo. Do you know if I'm pronouncing that correct?
I would guess so, but it's not cow as in COW. It is cow KAO.
And this is actually an older game. Like, this is from the original era of mascot platformers.
I was gonna say this has a lot of like Banjo-Kazooie.
We're talking back in the day. So, and this is not a remaster. This is a full-fledged, brand new Cow the Kangaroo game. So I had no idea about Cow the Kangaroo way back in the day. Never played one, but it looks to definitely scratch that nostalgic platformer mascot itch if you have it. I mean, it looks like it's a collectathon. Very vibrant colors, and you get to hop around as a kangaroo who presumably has a lot of attitude, because I mean, why would he not? So those are the two games to look out for. We also have some free stuff to call out. Not a ton. We're still waiting on PS Plus news for June, because apparently the first Tuesday of June is like the 7th. So it's kind of a weird, the dates line up weird, and we won't get the news for PS Plus until we're in June, which is a little bit frustrating. Hopefully it'll be good. That'll also mark the launch of their whole new PS Plus Premium Extra basic tier system. So stay tuned for that. Next week we should have that news. Over on Epic, they've continued to give away some pretty solid free games here. They just got done with, I believe it was Borderlands 3 from last week.
Correct.
And so now you should hop on over to Epic and grab the BioShock collection, which is completely free to own and includes BioShock 1, 2, as well as Infinite. So
those are worth picking up too.
That's pretty solid. I mean, definitely. I played one and Infinite quite a few years ago. Apparently 2 is the redheaded stepchild of the bunch. Yeah. So, but yeah, those are free. So go grab them. There's also a sale. That's it pretty much for free stuff that I felt was worth calling out. But there's also a bunch of sales going on. We have, there's a pretty big sale going on at Epic. So when you grab your free game, they no doubt want you to check out all those sales. And then Days of Play is currently going on the PlayStation Store. So there's a lot of lot of sales going on there. I went and checked it out. Unfortunately for me, everything I've been watching, there wasn't anything too exciting. I feel like the sales are the same as they ever are. I would love to see some of these prices come down for games that have been out like years
Right.
at this point, and they just keep fluctuating between full price and the sale price every time they have a sale. But nonetheless, there's definitely some things to be found there if you've been holding off on some games. And then, oh, you threw this in free in free stuff, but it's not. This was a story, but I'll go ahead and mention it here. This was a cool little story. We'll end on. Pokemon have introduced Ditto cards, which I assume maybe we can find some video to throw up. But literally, you know how Ditto? Do you know how Ditto works in the game?
Mm-hmm. I do, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
like it'll appear as a different Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
And then I believe after you capture him or defeat him, it will unveil that it was in fact Ditto the whole time, right? Because he's like this amorphous blob creature that mimics other sentient beings. And so now there's a mechanic in Pokemon card packs where you can open your card pack, and I forget which creatures Ditto can be. There's only so many creatures he can be, I think. But all
I
of
thought
those
it could be
cards in that
anything, but
pack.
it could be
Oh,
wrong.
could he? I don't know. I'll have to check the lore on Ditto. But literally, they put a sticker. They put a sticker on a Pokemon card, on various Pokemon cards,
Ah,
and you'll be going through your deck, and you'll pull off the sticker, and Ditto will be underneath. So I thought that was really cool. That like just a really cool idea.
that is a cool
Obviously,
idea.
it would suck if they like. I know they have better sense than to do this with like a hollow, like a rare card, or like a, what do they call it, GX cards, because that would be
Yeah, something
infuriating to think you
amazing.
got.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, oh my god, best card, and then you pull it off and it's Ditto. Although that would be an excellent
What if,
troll. Like that would be
what if it's a Hollow
hilarious.
GX Ditto?
There you
Hmm?
go, and then you pull it off and it's
That's
a
not as
regular
cool.
Ditto.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yeah, that's just another bonus story. I thought that was kind of charming and fun. That's a cool thing for them to have done. So, bonus story. All right, well, that'll wrap it
Awesome.
up for this week in gaming. If you stuck with us, thank you very much. And remember, you can find us over on Patreon at patreon.com/neverlag. And we'll catch you next week on This Week in Gaming.